So we got a very interesting report that dropped earlier today that I think impacts the Las Vegas Raiders' ability to go after a quarterback. This is a quarterback that, based off the people that I've spoken to, is the hottest name right now when it comes to free agency. Right? If you think about it, long-term potential in a quarterback, if you think about, let's sign a guy for 3 to 5 years and this is our guy for the future, there's no name that's bigger than Sam Darnold. And I know a lot of people kind of will disagree with that, and a lot of people don't think Sam Darnold's the type of quarterback for your team, and I kind of agree with that as well, right? I'm not super high on Sam Darnold, but do understand that teams, initially weren't super high on Baker Mayfield either, right? When he was with the Rams, when he kind of did his thing over there, he ended up with the Buccaneers on literally just a 1-year contract because even the Buccaneers didn't really want him. He went out, proved himself, and he's now their franchise quarterback. And we've seen other quarterbacks kind of have the same success. Geno Smith's an example of it. And Sam Darnold, some people think, is that next example of that as well. And what that means is there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks right now that want Sam Darnold. Right? There's teams, for example, like the Los Angeles Rams, that are willing to move off of Matthew Stafford, a Super Bowl winning quarterback, just to get younger at the position with Sam Darnold, a guy that Sean McVay might feel like I can have for the next 10 years. I believe Sam Darnold's like 27 years old, so he's still fairly young for a quarterback in the NFL. And his best football is obviously going to be in front of him, right? And Sam Darnold right now, believe it or not, is the hottest name when it comes to teams that need a quarterback. And although I might not agree with that, the Las Vegas Raiders are obviously in that same sweepstake. And today we got some unfortunate news, which basically is putting it out there that the Minnesota Vikings are going to basically bring back Sam Darnold, right? They haven't actually announced that specifically, but follow me here for a second. If you guys did not know this, the official period where you can franchise tag a player has officially begun today, right? So as of today through March 4th, teams can basically franchise tag players or give them the transition tag that are basically about to become free agents, right? So guys like T. Higgins, for example, for the Cincinnati Bengals, T. Higgins is about to become a free agent, but the Bengals have already put it out there that they're going to franchise tag T. Higgins. So they're not going to let this guy walk, right? They're not going to allow that to happen. The Vikings have options as well, right? They could franchise tag potentially Sam Darnold or Byron Murphy Jr., right? If they want to keep either one of these guys back, they can just give them the franchise tag. The Chiefs have Troy Smith. Even the Raiders technically have Trayvon Merrick and a couple of the guys that we could potentially franchise tag. But basically, you franchise tag a guy. You pay him, basically, I think it's like top 10 salary. Average of the top 10 salary at their position. So, if you want to bring in a guy like Sam Darnold or Byron Murphy and you franchise tag him for that team, or for the Raiders if it's Trayvon Merrick, you're basically going to make this guy one of the highest paid players, right? And because of the fact that that period begun today, there's also a lot of people whose contracts actually expired today. And that's kind of where this story is going next. Dan Grazzano of ESPN, he's a legit insider, actually just put it out there, said that per league source, the Vikings and cornerback Byron Murphy agreed to push back the void date in his contract. Originally, the deal voided 23 days prior to the start of the league year, which would have been today. Now it's the day before the start of the league year, which means Murphy cannot be franchise tagged since the date is past the deadline for teams to use the franchise tag. So basically, what Dan Grazzano is putting it out there is the fact that the Minnesota Vikings wanted to keep Byron Murphy, and they did not want this guy to become an actual free agent, right? They wanted to have that opportunity to keep him on their roster, to work it out, right? Essentially what they did was they pushed back that void date, and that also gives them that flexibility in terms of like those void years and those type of things. If the void date happens, his contract gets set in stone. They don't want that to happen. They obviously want to keep this guy around, so that's why they went ahead and did that. But there's another reason why you'd want to push that back. There's another reason why you'd want to make that happen with Byron Murphy, because you want to show this guy that we want to keep you, and we can't franchise tag you because we have a different guy we have to franchise tag. Right? Sam Darnold apparently is the guy, and keep in mind, you cannot franchise 2 players, right? It's not something you can do. You can only franchise tag 1 guy. So for the Minnesota Vikings, when you have a cornerback in Byron Murphy who proved himself to be a top 5 corner this past season, you're not letting that guy walk. At the same time, you have Sam Darnold, who's a quarterback. You're not letting that guy walk either. And based off the reports, it does look like the Minnesota Vikings plan to franchise tag Sam Darnold, which means if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, you're probably not going to be able to bring in Sam Darnold the way we actually thought, right? It's at least not going to be something where you don't have to give up draft picks. Now, it's not guaranteed that the Minnesota Vikings are going to keep Sam Darnold long term. There's a chance they just franchise tag him. They look to trade him. I think that'd actually be the smart thing to do if you're the Vikings. And if you don't want to move Sam Darnold, I think it'd be smarter at that point to trade J.J. McCarthy, who still has a ton of value. So to me, the Minnesota Vikings got to figure out which quarterback they want to keep. But they are not going to let Sam Darnold just walk for free, right? And I think if you're the Las Vegas Raiders and you actually wanted to bring in Sam Darnold, and remember, you might not like Sam Darnold as a quarterback. You might feel like he can't get it done. But we have to realize that in the NFL, general managers don't think the same way we think, right? If you have a top 15 quarterback, you'll be in the playoffs. If you don't have a top 15 quarterback, you're probably not going to make the playoffs, at least consistently. And more than that, you miss the playoffs 2 or 3 years, you're out of a job. And we know that to factually happen, right? We've seen that happen multiple times with the Raiders general managers. If John Spytek wants to be here long term, he might think differently of Sam Darnold. And again, we saw how the Buccaneers felt and what they ultimately did with Baker Mayfield. And they've been in the playoffs every year since Mayfield has went to the Buccaneers. So there's a chance Sam Darnold is a guy that the Raiders will ultimately target. But at this point, it doesn't look like Sam Darnold is going to be a realistic option for the Raiders. So the Vikings are probably going to end up franchise tagging him, which does suck for the Raiders. But again, I'm not huge on Sam Darnold, so I'm okay with the Raiders actually looking a whole different direction. Truth be told, if I'm the one that's making the decision, if I'm the Las Vegas Raiders, I think it makes a lot more sense to go all in short term for a quarterback like Matthew Stafford or a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. And again, I don't think it makes sense to go all in on a quarterback like Sam Darnold, where you're going to invest 4 or 5 years for this guy. To me, it makes the most sense to say, let's get a quarterback for the short term and let's try to win now. Right? If you think about where the Raiders are from a coaching perspective, and we've already talked about this multiple times, the Raiders have a really, really solid coaching staff. You don't get a group of coaches like Pete Carroll, who's a Super Bowl winner, Chip Kelly, who's won at the highest level, Patrick Graham, who's proven himself for the past couple of years. But even if you're not sold on Patrick Graham, remember, Pete Carroll is a defensive coach. So you got a Super Bowl winning coach running that defense and then Chip Kelly running that offense. You don't generally get that at the coaching, as your coaching staff that often in the NFL. So if I'm the Las Vegas Raiders, you think about some of the players you already have. If you're able to bring in a quarterback that's experienced, a quarterback that's solid, a quarterback that has been elite in the past and even last season has shown elite upside, I would go all in with that. In fact, I think right now the Raiders have a window of opportunity for the next 2 to 3 years where you can kind of go all in and try to win a Super Bowl. If you think about where the Raiders team is right now, you have some young guys that you can capitalize around that eventually are going to become top tier players in terms of the salary cap, right? Jackson Powers-Johnson will become the highest paid center at some point. And then Brock Bowers will become the highest paid tight end at some point. When you start paying guys and making them the highest paid at any given position, you're, as a team, going to get a little bit worse, right? We've seen it happen with so many teams over the years. If you want to capitalize, you got to capitalize when guys are, on contracts that benefit the team, right? And I think if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, it makes the most sense to go all in short term on the quarterback. Now, the Raiders do have a couple of options in terms of the franchise tag. I want to just kind of go over some of these guys that are options for the Raiders. Truth be told, I probably wouldn't bring in any of these guys. Trayvon Merrick is one of the guys that we could technically franchise tag. It costs us $19.6 million. That's per year, and I think Trayvon Merrick is obviously the only guy that actually would make sense for that tag. Some people don't want to believe this, and I understand, a lot of Raider fans, and this isn't just Raider fans, a lot of fans in general don't watch tape, right? A lot of fans will rely on stats. They'll rely on interception numbers. They'll rely on, touchdowns or sacks, and they don't rely on actual tape. But Trayvon Merrick is one of the 3 to 5 best safeties in the NFL. Right? The guy's an elite safety. The guy absolutely dominated this past season. And people don't really notice it, right? But the Raiders did have a really good secondary this past season. And even the year before, obviously they had a lot of injuries this past season, but Trayvon Merrick's been really, really good. And he's been the leader in the backfield, right? Or I should say in the third level of that defense, right? In that secondary. Trayvon Merrick could definitely make sense for a franchise tag. It's going to cost $19.6 million. If you don't franchise him, I think even the actual contract that he's going to sign is going to be north of $16 million. And, it is unfortunate that the Raiders might actually end up losing Trayvon Merrick, but I would hope that they're able to bring him back at some point, considering that there's no income tax either in Vegas that could benefit the Raiders a little bit. But it will be interesting to see what his contract would be, right? So Budda Baker signed a contract worth $18 million a year. And then Xavier McKinney signed 16.75. Between those two guys, I think Budda Baker is probably better than Trayvon Merrick. Not by a whole lot, but I think he is. Xavier McKinney, I would not say is better than Trayvon Merrick, and he got 16.75. And then, of course, Antonio Winfield Jr. is the highest paid safety, and then Derwin James is second. So we'll see what Trayvon Merrick ends up getting. I think Antoine Winfield makes around 21 to 22 million. Malcolm Koonce, the other guy that it could make sense if you're the Raiders, but $24 million is a lot of money, right? And the thing with Malcolm Koonce, if you guys think about it, or I'm sorry, with Trayvon Merrick is at 19 million, I could definitely see how, he's a top 5 safety. 19 million, the number makes sense. He's healthy. He's been healthy. As opposed to Malcolm Koonce, if you gave Koonce an actual contract right now, I would think he gets around 15 to 20 million absolute max, right? But somewhere closer to 15, if not even a little bit less than that. So the franchise tag doesn't make sense for Malcolm Koonce. And truth be told, it doesn't make sense for any of these other guys. Robert Spillane, 27 million does not make sense for him. I mean, that'd be a terrible tag. Nate Hobbs, 20 million. And I don't even know if these figures are actually correct. They actually might not be 100% correct, to be honest. I don't think a linebacker would make 27 million, but maybe it's right. Nate Hobbs, 20. I would not give him that. Butler, 23. That number is definitely correct, but I wouldn't give him that either. But it is kind of interesting to really think about this. Adam Butler is a top 10 pass rusher, and D tackles are getting north of 30 million already, right? And Butler is a top 10 pass rusher, and I would say his fair market value is probably somewhere around $15 million. And what's crazy is Adam Butler last year made like $3 million. I don't know how the Raiders were able to keep him at that price. I would think, even based off the 2023 tape, that some team would look at Adam Butler and say, we want that guy, right? He's a good pass rusher, and the Raiders somehow brought him back for just $3 million, right? It's kind of crazy, but, as I was saying earlier, Adam Butler, right, was making $3 million. Nate Hobbs was making like $2 million. Malcolm Koonce was making like $2 million. Trayvon Merrick was making like $2 million, right? All these guys are, and yeah, it's rookie contracts, but all these guys are being paid at an amount where, their fair market value is 5 times that, right? And it's just interesting to think that the Raiders really had that opportunity last year based off the fact that we're going to lose probably half of these guys, right? I think there's a real chance that, Nate Hobbs, Trayvon Merrick, Malcolm Koonce, Adam Butler, Spillane, I think there's a real chance 3 of those 6 guys are not even here next year. I think there's a real chance that ends up happening. And remember, a lot of people talk about that $100 million in cap space that the Raiders have. Is not that much money considering Hobbs might get 10 and Merrick gets 20 and Koonce gets 20. Butler gets 10, Spillane gets 10. 50 million, 60 million's gone just right there with those guys alone, right? Let's wrap this video up though, man. I wanted to show you guys something that actually happened earlier today. You guys know this. I work as a scout for the Hula Bulls, so I'm 100% invested on the NFL draft process. And it's not even like the top tier guys, right? Ashton Jeanty, everybody knows he's the best running back. I watched his tape once, spent 10 minutes watching it. I'll never watch it again. Now, I already know he's going to be the next special running back, but there's a lot of guys that people don't really watch tape of that are legit football players, and NFL.com is the one that I think a lot of people widely respect. They put their grades out there, right? So you can go to NFL.com now and you can look at the grades for their players that are coming out in this class, and there's some interesting things. I think we're going to start to see this happen a little bit with the shift in terms of, which players rank kind of where. One of the interesting things that I saw right away, which was kind of interesting, came at the defensive tackle position. You can see that Walter Nolan has a much higher grade than Mason Graham. Like, it's not even close, right? You see the difference in the grade with Mason Graham relative to Walter Nolan. And I'm not surprised to see that, right? Not that I guess I'm surprised to see Walter Nolan ranked that high, but like to see Mason Graham not be the clear-cut top 3 guy that everybody's been kind of hyping him up for. In fact, if you just go to all the grades, this guy's a lot lower than where I think kind of coming in people were saying, right? People were saying Mason Graham might be the best defensive player in the country, right? But he is not ranked where I think a lot of people might actually think. So I just kind of found it interesting. There's a couple other positional units I want to kind of show you guys. Wide receiver, Tetra McMillan is tied for second, which is kind of interesting in its own right as well, right? Luther Burden gets the higher grade than McMillan. And I'm not 100% even opposed to that, to be honest with you guys. I think Luther Burden's a really, really good wide receiver. He was at Missouri. He played with Brady Cook. Missouri just didn't have the same type of success this year that they have had last year, but Missouri also played a lot of really good, talented players and teams, generally speaking. But it is interesting nonetheless, right, that McMillan is not the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver now. You do obviously have Travis Hunter ranked as a corner. He gets ranked as the number 1 corner. I still think Hunter's going to be the number 1 overall player that's going to come off the board. And I think if he's a pure wide receiver, I think Hunter's the best wide receiver. In fact, if he's there at pick 6 from the Raiders, I would draft him just to play wide receiver. Travis Hunter has like that Jamar Chase ability with the ball in his hands, right? The guy just is faster. He just moves better than most people. Remember, this guy was the number 1 player coming out of high school, coming into college. And the guy's dominated, right? So it's not like he was kind of just like he's dominated, right? He is the, absolute elite player, playmaker in this class, other than Ashton Genty. and Travis Hunter's kind of right there. You guys can also see that the quarterback grades are fairly low. I'll show you guys the quarterback grades. Cam Ward, 6.39. Shedeur Sanders, 6.3. Jackson Dart gets ranked 3rd. And then, of course, Ewers 4th. Gabriel 5th. Moreau 6th. Will Howard's kind of low, right? Surprisingly, and same with Kyle McCord, kind of low. That'll be interesting to see how that kind of shapes out. I think the running backs, another one that's kind of interesting, Trayvon Henderson gets ranked as RB2. And the guy that I was kind of surprised with was Caleb Johnson. I had Caleb Johnson as my RB2, but he gets ranked way down below here by NFL.com. So it is going to be kind of interesting. And then lastly, we'll just touch on the offensive lineman really quickly. I posted this on Twitter. If you guys follow me on Twitter, you guys know I posted this. In fact, you can go to my profile on Twitter, and you can put this guy's name in right here. Armin Mabo out of Missouri. On Twitter, I posted a video of this guy, and I said, hey, if this guy was like 6'4.5", 6'5", he'd be the number 1 tackle in this class. Purely based off of tape, right? And he's the number 1 ranked guy by NFL.com. And I'm not surprised to see that. Now, Armin Mambo is 6'3", right? So we're not really sure if he'll play tackle in the NFL. Truth be told, if I need an offensive tackle and this guy's there with pick 19 and I have pick 19, I would draft him to play offensive tackle. I know majority of the time 6'3" is not going to work, but remember, this guy's not the rule. He'll be the exception, right? He'll be the one guy that can actually do it. And I think he's going to end up becoming a really, really good football player at the next level. And I would draft him to be a tackle. Now, would I take him with pick 6? That's an interesting question. I think it's a little risky to take him with pick 6. If you wanted to tackle, I think Josh Simmons of Ohio State's probably a better prospect to take with the 6th overall pick. Just because he's played tackle and he's had success at tackle. But I do agree that Armin Mabo has the best tape by far. And, keep in mind he's being ranked as a tackle, not as a guard. Kelvin Banks getting ranked as a tackle, number 2 tackle. Will Campbell, number 3 tackle. I don't agree with Campbell actually being ranked as a tackle. I think he's a guard at the next level. And then you got Donovan Jackson and Tyler Booker as the 2 best interior offensive linemen at 6.4. That's a really, really good grade for both of those guys. And I do agree those are the 2 best interior offensive linemen. Josh Connerly gets ranked as offensive tackle 4. Simmons, offensive tackle 5. Ozu Trapilo, offensive tackle 6. And then Anthony Belton as OT 7. I will say this. I think Belton's going to actually end up going higher than what a lot of people think. I think he's going to end up going in the first round. If he plays guard, I think he becomes a top 2 guard within the first year that he's in the NFL. If he plays tackle, I think he can be a long-term tackle as well. I think Wyatt Milliam is also way too high. I'm not a fan of Milliam as much as I was early on in the process. I watched him at the Senior Bowl, and although he had some good reps, he definitely got pushed back a little bit. It's going to be interesting as we kind of get into the process, right? And I'll just show you guys the defensive ends really quickly as well. Abdul Carter, number 2 overall player. You can kind of see the grade difference between him and Mikael Williams, Mike Green, Shamar Stewart, and some of these other guys. James Pierce Jr. gets a grade of a 6.4. And all these guys are pretty close. But you can see Abdul Carter is clearly the number 1 edge in this class. I wouldn't 100% agree with that, to be honest, guys. I don't think, Abdul Carter being the best DN, I don't think there's that big of a difference between Carter and some of these next guys, right? I'm not 100% sure who I'd probably put as edge 2. I'd like James Pierce Jr. a lot as edge 2. but it is hard to put him out there because of the fact that he hasn't had the same production that you see from other guys. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Pierce is built differently, but he doesn't have that motor, right? And I think sometimes you got to have that motor to be able to clean things up and make plays, and he doesn't really show that at Tennessee. Now, do note, statistically, Abdul Carter has the better stats, but if you break it down on a per snap basis, James Pierce Jr. has the best stats in all of college football, right? He just didn't play as many snaps as Carter because of the fact that Tennessee blew out a lot of opponents, right? So he kind of came off the field. But it will be interesting nonetheless. We'll see what kind of ends up happening as we kind of go forward. I'm excited for it, man, because we are obviously at the, we're obviously at the off-season building process, right? Or actually the part of the off-season, the team building process, where you can get better as a football team, as a football roster. You can improve and you can really change the direction of your team. It takes one draft to absolutely change your entire team. And I think with the Raiders, we did a really, really good job last year. I think a good draft this year, you get that quarterback, right? Regardless, maybe it's Sam Darnold, maybe it's Aaron Rodgers, maybe it's Matthew Stafford, whoever it is, as long as you don't overpay. And I think the overpay part of it's really the big thing. If you get a quarterback at the league minimum, $2, $3, $4 million for 2 years, right? Because with Aaron Rodgers, you can get that, right? The Jets owe Aaron Rodgers money. So for the Raiders, it's going to be a lot cheaper this year. If you're able to somehow do that, you're winning, right? There's no way you're going to lose out at that point. And I think the worst thing the Raiders can do at this point is draft a bust at the quarterback position, right? You can either set yourself forward by basically going forward with a veteran quarterback, a safer option at quarterback, or, you might be able to put yourself into Super Bowl contention with the rookie quarterback. But if he busts out, you're looking at potentially having to restart 3-4 years down the line, right? So we'll see what ends up happening, man. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Who are you picking at quarterback? Who are some of your draft some of your draft steals, I should say? Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.